Today's presentation is on a North Carolina group during the colonial time period known as the Regulators. Before we start that, you're going to warm up at the top of your page. So you're going to use a word from the word bank for each of the 5 sentences below. So go ahead, work on those for a second, pause the video, get those done, and then hit play when you're ready to check. Okay. Here's our answers. First one, a charter was a contract granted by a king or queen to those in charge of a settlement. We've talked about charters with the Carolina Charter that gave the Lords Proprietors control of all the land in the Carolinas, both North and South Carolina, all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We also talked about the Virginia Company of London and the Virginia Company of Plymouth, who had charters from the King of England to set up colonies in the New World. Next, we have the Test Act. It was part of Culpeper's Rebellion. That basically said anybody who was going to be a public official or in the government had to swear their allegiance to the Anglican Church or the Church of England. It upsets people who belong to the Quaker religion, because then they had to either pledge allegiance to a different religion or work in the government, but they couldn't do both. Leads to Culpeper's Rebellion and this struggle over control and religious freedom. Next, we have a boycott. A boycott is to refuse to buy someone's product. That is going to come into play much more with the Boston Tea Party. Next, we've got the French and Indian War. That's a war between England and France that begins in 1754 for control of North America. England does better than France. England ends up gaining the control of most of the continent at the end of the war. However, it was very expensive, so to raise money to pay for the war, England ends up charging high taxes to the colonies. Those high taxes to the colonies are what in part leads to the Revolutionary War and the colonies breaking away and becoming their own independent country. And next is the focus of today's lesson, that is the Regulators. The Regulators were a group that protested corruption and taxes of the colonial government. Okay. Before we get into the Regulators, we have to talk about sectionalism, because without understanding what this sectionalism is, who the Regulators are doesn't really make sense. So sectionalism basically means to divide either a country or a state into kind of different parts with their different cultural beliefs, oftentimes different rivalries between the two different sections. The map shows the United States right before Civil War time in the section, how it was sectioned off. We're going to talk about North Carolina. North Carolina was divided into basically the eastern part, which was the rich. They were called bogies. They were considered to be here first. That was either the people that came down from Virginia or people that came straight from England. They stayed mostly on the coast. And this goes in the box under where it says the Regulators and next to where it says sectionalism. And then, so the east was one section. The other section was the western. That was the poorer, more country. They were called Hicks. They were the newer immigrants. They came from Germany. They came from Moravia, which is today the Czech Republic. They were the Scots-Irish. Those were those groups that we looked at on that chart on one of the previous presentations. So, next one down. I'm going to say North Carolina. I'm going to write the word governor in the first blank, and then 1765 in the second blank. And then in that box where it says governor, I'm going to put Tryon in that blank. William Tryon was the North Carolina governor in 1765, and the Regulator movement, or the Regulator period, was from 1765 to 1771, and Tryon was the governor during this whole time. So when we use his name in the next couple slides, it's to know who he was, what his role was, what his position was. So, the backcountry. The backcountry was where, when we did that North Carolina, or immigrant settle North Carolina chart, most of those groups were settling in what we consider the backcountry, kind of from Orange County, which is very close to where we currently are, and west. The western colonists had problems with Governor Tryon. They thought he focused too much on the interests of the people that lived on the coast. The capital of North Carolina was still on the coast at this point. It wasn't out in Raleigh yet. They thought they were taxed too much. Because they didn't have as much money, the taxes had a much bigger effect on the backcountry residents, so they were upset about the taxes. They were also upset that Tryon puts in power people who collect the unfair taxes, and they collect these taxes with ruthless ways. They'll resort to violence to get these taxes. So this group called the Regulators, so go down now. We've got a blank next to a box. Regulators is the word that goes in that blank. And then this first bullet here is what goes in the box. The Regulators were the first gang in America. They wanted to regulate and make fair taxes for everyone. They thought that the taxes had a much higher burden on the poor people, so they wanted to have a more even tax structure, something that where the rich paid a little more, the poor people paid a little bit less, so it affected them all the same. They were willing to resort to violence. Remember, I said they thought Governor Tryon's forces were violent and were unfair in collecting the taxes in the first place, so they saw this as meeting violence with violence. So they basically, 1771, they're really, really upset. They're frustrated. Tensions have reached a climax, and they start to take action. One of the first things they do is they fire shots into the governor's house. They attack the tax collectors, and they burn down government buildings, all in the form of protest and to show that they're serious. And these bullet points here are the bottom 3 points on the page. So that's a little background, who the Regulators were, why they were upset. I want to talk next about what it leads to, and it leads to something called the Battle of Alamance. So you've got notes on the back of your page, it says 1 through 9, for the Battle of Alamance notes. Okay? The name of the battle is the Battle of Alamance. So that number 1, you're going to put Alamance. Next, where did this battle happen? Battle happened on Alamance Creek near Hillsborough, North Carolina. So just down the road, just down 85 from here. There were 2 main sides of the battle. There was Governor Tryon, and on his side was the British Redcoats. And they were going against the Regulators. The battle happened in May of 1771. So I only have a year here for number 4. I want you to add May 1771. And if we go back, we can look May 16, 1771. So for date of battle, put May 16, 1771. How long did the battle last? It lasted 2 hours. At the end of the battle, 20 people were dead and 150 were wounded. It's a loss for the Regulators. Most of those dead were Regulators. Some of the leaders, and we'll talk about what happened to some of the leaders in number 8. But the result is that Tryon makes sure that all the backcountry residents know that he is in charge and he has the support of the British Army, that's the British Redcoats, at his back to help him have control over the whole colony. Number 8, some of the Regulators, that especially some of the leaders, they were hung for taking part in and leading the battle and leading the Regulators. Last one, it leads to, in part, the American Revolution and the Revolutionary War. And the things that caused the Battle of Alamance, unfair taxes, unfair treatment by the British, but towards the colonists, are the same reasons that the American Revolution happens. Here are our modern counties today. Here's Alamance County, and we are right here in the middle of the state. We are here, so just a little bit over from us was where this battle happened. There was a militia that was under the royal governor, defeated the Regulators on May 16th, 1771. Here's a picture of a monument to that battle. Here is a picture or painting that shows a depiction of the battle. Here are the Regulators, so you got a small number of guys, mostly with their hunting weapons. And here are the Redcoats. Okay, so that's the British soldiers. Lines and lines of British soldiers coming to battle the Regulators. Okay. So now you're going to design a battle monument after the Battle of Alamance. So it could be something like this. Could be something like this. It doesn't have to be any of these, but these are things that it could be. Could be something like this. This is an actual monument to one of the leaders of the Regulator movement. This just has a little bit more information about one of the leaders, James Hunter. Here is a battle map on the Battle of Alamance. There's another one. And that's all. So your task is you're going to design your own Battle of Alamance monument. And you can work with a partner with this. You should draw a sketch at the bottom of your notes. So anything, any sort of statue or monument to commemorate or to celebrate this battle. So draw a sketch of what your monument will look like on the bottom of your paper. And then if you work in partners or if you work by yourself, you will then draw your monument again on a bigger piece of paper. And on that paper, you're also going to write an inscription. Basically, you're going to include a summary of what happened at the battle. Use your points in 1 through 9. You can use a little bit from the front of the notes. And also page 148 and 149 in the North Carolina textbook. A detailed paragraph that includes all the information from above, and draw a monument as your next performance task. Okay, that's all.